Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We'll just give people another minute or two to join, then we'll get started. Okay, looks like we have about 57 participants with us now, so we will begin. My name is Jane Geller, and I'm with BNA Studios. I will be facilitating tonight's virtual information session. On behalf of the project team, thank you for taking the time to attend and learn more about the proposed outline plan and land use amendment for Haskayne North. Before we begin, I'll quickly walk through how tonight's session will work. This session is being recorded and will be shared after the event for those who were unable to attend or would like to review the materials. We will begin with a presentation from the project team. This will cover the site context, policy framework, and the proposed applications. And after the presentation, we'll move into the Q&A portion of the session. If you have a question during the presentation, you are welcome to submit it at any time using the Q&A function at the bottom of your window. We will respond to as many questions as we can after the formal presentation. If you would prefer to ask your question verbally, please use the raise hand feature during the Q&A and we will call on you. For general comments or feedback, we ask that you use the feedback form rather than the Q&A. We'll share that link in the chat at the end of the session. So the Q&A is intended for questions about the project, and the feedback form is the best place to share comments, concerns, or suggestions so they can be properly captured as part of the engagement summary. We also want to thank everyone who has already submitted questions or shared feedback in advance. We understand there are a range of perspectives on how this area should develop, and we appreciate your participation in the process. All feedback collected will be reviewed and summarized as part of the engagement process. So with that, I will now turn it over to Kathy, who will introduce the rest of the team herself, walk through the site, and provide an overview of the proposal. Kathy, over to you.
That's great. Thank you and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. With us tonight, you've got myself and Jane and Alan from BNA. So we're the planning team working on the project. I also have Dennis and Adrian from the development team here as the landowners. And part of our technical team, I've got Jason from Bunt and Phil from Urban Systems here to answer some of the technical questions that might come up. So I'm going to start by grounding us with where we are and why the site is being planned now. The lands we're discussing this evening are part of Calgary's Northwest Growth Area and have been identified for future development for quite some time through a number of Calgary-approved policies and applications. While the site is currently undeveloped, it has historically been used for agricultural purposes, and you can see remnants of that today. It was the Damcar Dairy Farm. While it's important here that these lands are now ready for redevelopment, many of you here this evening come from within the city of Calgary and from Rocky View County. So it will be important that we start with some understanding of the policy direction for these lands. Additionally, as we move through this, I also want to acknowledge that we have received some questions related to environmental protection and water quality and how development is being considered alongside these factors. And so we'll hopefully address those this evening as well as within our questions. Those are important considerations, and they are a key part of how sites like this are evaluated through both city policy and technical review. So I will touch on some of that context as we go. So you may be wondering why planning is happening at this time. Planning typically moves forward when a landowner brings forward an application with an area that has already been identified for growth through city policy, and that's the case here. The site is within an approved area structure plan, and the landowners have initiated the planning process. It actually started with a growth application, and I'll explain that in a few minutes. The application responds to continued growth in Calgary and the demand for housing, especially in the Northwest. For decades, this sector has been void of growth and only recently has seen development in Rockland Park and Greenwich. Calgary, unlike all other cities in Canada, saw unprecedented growth in the last 2 years, and the communities in the Northwest have developed quickly. When we look at the surrounding area, this site is very unique. It has a very unique location. It is directly adjacent to natural features, including the Bow River Valley and Haskayne Legacy Park, while also being next to developing neighborhoods like Rockland Park and communities in our adjacent municipality. We have an opportunity here to continue development and create a neighborhood that connects well into existing and future open space and regional pathways. Because of its proximity to the Bow River Valley and regional open space network, this site is part of a broader ecological system. It will include a pathway that will help extend our system into Glenbow and further to Cochrane, as well as into Beaumont Park and other parks within the regional pathway network within Calgary. This doesn't mean that the entire site is preserved as a natural area, but it does mean that planning must preserve some elements, and in some instances, environmental reserve by definition of the Municipal Government Act. This includes identifying where development is appropriate, where open spaces should be maintained, and how connections to the broader community through roads and pathways are supported. So what is the planning process? I just want to take a few minutes to describe the City of Calgary planning process. It can be similar to other municipalities, but it can also be different. It starts with the planning policy. The Municipal Development Plan, also known as the Calgary Plan, and the area structure plans are the policies that set the stage for all land within the city, especially annexed land with high-level assumptions in the Municipal Development Plan, and then community scale assumptions within the area structure plan. And I'll show examples of this in the next slides related to this policy. From there, we go into land use and outline plan applications, which is what we're here to talk about tonight, which provide entitlements and a roadmap for the next applications, including subdivision, building infrastructure, and ultimately building homes and occupancy. It should be noted that the City of Calgary is a little different than some of the other municipalities in the region. They complete a very detailed analysis at the land use and outline plan stage to ensure that they're comfortable with development. So before getting into the proposal, it's important to understand how decisions are made for a site like this, and I'll walk through that policy. The Municipal Development Plan identifies where growth should occur across the city. This site falls within an area intended for future residential communities. These lands were annexed in 2007 from Rocky View County, and they are contained within the city, while neighbors to our east and north are located within the county. One would say this is the most unique city limit line within the city, with the desire to have Haskayne Park accessed through city land. The next level of policy underneath the MDP is the Area Structure Plan. This provides the identification of key elements such as neighborhood areas, major roadways, regional pathways, activity centers, and areas that require more environmental analysis. This policy was approved in 2018, and you'll also see locations for community centers, schools, EMS, and commercial. The application we are presenting today is not starting from scratch. Engagement occurred during the area structure plan stage with the broader public. It is building on that approved policy direction and translating it into a more detailed plan for this specific neighborhood. The intent is to ensure that development is planned in a way that respects the land, but it's guided by technical study analysis. Our lands contain the following items: regional and green corridor pathways, a neighborhood activity center, residential, and environmental open space study area. And you might be curious, what is environmental open space study area? It's an area where further analysis is required. It's an area where we need to confirm if it's geotechnically stable for development, and if it is, then it's suitable for development, and if it isn't, then it's required to be contained as environmental reserve. Right now, the site is designated as special purpose future urban development. This is a standard district with annexed land. What that means is that the land is set aside for future urban use, but development cannot proceed until the appropriate planning applications are undertaken. This is why a land use amendment is required because it doesn't have any land use entitlements at the moment. I spoke previously that the site had already been through an application, and it was called a growth application. As part of an area structure plan, it is required that the land go through a process to determine if the site requires capital infrastructure investment in order to develop. And you might wonder, what is capital infrastructure investment? It can be things like land for fire halls, interchanges, large city pipes, etc. And in 2018, Rockland Park was brought forward with a growth application, and investment was made, which also extended to these lands as well. When we submitted our growth application last year, it was determined that these lands could proceed immediately without requiring any more investment. And last year, the growth application was approved. So you can see with this image that the city has many communities developing around the city. So the discussion we're having today is not about whether development should occur here, but how it is planned in a way that aligns with policy and responds to the site. A land use amendment establishes what type of land could be built on the site. It sets parameters like the type of uses, the general scale of development, and the overall intensity. A helpful way to think about it is that the land sets the rules and later stages apply those rules to specific designs. So at this point, we're not deciding exactly what buildings will look like, but we are defining the range of what is possible. A land use has to be approved by City Council and will have a public hearing and 3 readings. The public is welcome to come and speak or submit letters for that process. So in Calgary, different than Rocky View County, we apply for an application called a Land Use Amendment Outline Plan. Together, these set the foundation for a future neighborhood. The land use is what is approved by council, with the outline plan framework identified to help guide the land use. Imagine if you saw a drawing that only showed colors, like the image, the small image below. It would be difficult to interpret, where an outline plan is the block framework that guides the land use colors. What makes things a little confusing is that in the city of Calgary, we draw all of our land use lines to the middle of roads, which makes them look larger than what they actually are. Rather than focusing on specific buildings, this stage is about structuring the community. This includes how roads will connect, where parks are located, how people move through the area, and how different land uses are organized. The concept plan shown here is one way those lands could come together. It's important to note that it's still proposed and will continue to evolve through review and feedback from the City of Calgary. I want to pause here because outline plan can feel like a technical term, and the City of Calgary is unique to having that process. So at this stage, we're looking at big things like how is the neighborhood laid out? Where we'll be putting the different types of housing forms? Where will open space be preserved? How transportation and servicing are integrated? How the land responds to natural features, how the site will be graded, how the pathways will connect, and how we will interface with the edges. What it does not do is approve the buildings, the architecture, or the parcel site design. That happens at the subsequent approvals that I had shown earlier when I showed you the planning process. This is also the stage where the City of Calgary asks for very technical studies, and I'll show you a list later in this presentation. Earlier, I mentioned the additional analysis that's required for the environmental open space study area, and I can confirm that the stability analysis determined that the sloping lands are stable and developable. So when I was describing the elements required in the area structure plan, I mentioned that the site contains a neighborhood activity center. This can be described as an area that may include commercial, higher density, and open space. Essentially, it's a node of activity. We are planning to potentially pay some homage to the heritage of the site and look at some commercial uses. We wondered if maybe an ice cream shop might be appropriate or suitable, so we'll have to see how that goes as we develop out the site, or other uses. The purpose of the node is to create a more complete community where residents can access amenities closer to home while also supporting walkability and transit over time. At this stage, the exact mix of uses and design is not finalized. This is about identifying where that type of node would be located within the neighborhood structure. And you can see the design that we have here and it's located in the lower lands. There are some intensity requirements that are required with activity centers that we need to meet that's found in policy that I had described earlier. So open space is also a key component of how the community is being planned. The concept includes a network of parks and open spaces that are intended to provide recreation opportunities, support connections, and respond to the natural features of the site. This site includes integrating open space with the broader regional system, including nearby parks and pathway networks. At this stage, the focus is on identifying where the open space is located and how it functions. We do detailed park plans as part of the application, and that gets assessed by the city. And the goal is to try and balance the amenities as best we can across the plan area. You'll see in this area here, there's a couple different colors of green. This darker green, I'd say the duller green, is noted as an environmental reserve area. We do have some drainages that would qualify as environmental reserve. And then we also have supportive open spaces that we're placing in conjunction. You'll see linear parks that are being proposed, as well as adjacent parks that will be able to provide some amenity in connection to these natural areas that we're showing within the plan. And this is the storm pond feature that I identified earlier in the lower lands. It runs up against the rail. And you'll see the dots here that show the regional pathway network. Sometimes we have that network that comes down roadways, and sometimes we have it that goes through parks. And so it ends up being well connected and would connect into especially the regional pathway system that exists in Rockland Park. I'm going to talk a little bit about the road network. This shows the proposed road network for the site. It's intended to create a connected network that supports movements within the community and connections to the surrounding areas. It's designed to balance accessibility and safety and integration with the broader transportation network. At this stage, we're identifying the general structure of roads. A lot of that is if there's different classifications of roads that we have within the outline plan. And then we work through those details with the city in conjunction with the review of the transportation impact assessment. It goes hand in hand. And the city can evaluate if the road system is appropriate for the residential units that we're proposing within the neighborhood. The other thing that we also identify is pathways and active transportation. In Calgary, we have sidewalks that are on both sides of the street. As I noted, sometimes we have pathways that go alongside roadways, or we have pathways that are also contained within open spaces. It's here to support walking and cycling within the community and then connect to the broader regional system. Connections to nearby open space and regional pathways are an important part of how the network is structured. So this is a zoom in of the land use concept that was shown earlier in the corner. And it brings you back to what the application is proposing. We're showing a bunch of different uses, such as residential, open space, the neighborhood activity center. You can see we've got the CN2, the commercial use down at the bottom. And this is just showing how we could arrange these uses across the site. We've balanced our density both in the lower lands and also on the up in the top corner. The intent is to organize land uses in a way that align with policy, respond to the site conditions, and supports a connected community. The City of Calgary requires a minimum density of 8 units per acre, with a desire to achieve 10 units minimum over time to meet the goals of the municipal development plan. We have balanced a number of residential forms, working with the land to achieve a density meeting the city's needs. In addition to the residential land uses, as I noted, you'll see a little bit closer here those designations for park space, which is that SSPR, and the environmental areas, which is the SUN, to protect the drainages that move down the land. These corridors can be used by residents and also by wildlife should they move from the reservoir edge, but most likely they'll find refuge in Haskayne Park to the west. The land use amendment sets the parameters, but detailed design and final layouts are determined at a later stage. So I had noted earlier a number of technical studies that have been completed to support the application. These were, they had to be submitted at the time of submission, and they, in conjunction with review of the plan, the city departments will review these studies as well. They include environmental, geotechnical, transportation, and servicing studies. These studies help assess the site conditions, identify potential impacts, and inform how the plan is designed. For example, the environmental assessments consider the existing conditions and then identify whether we've got stable or unstable lands, while the transportation studies look at how the development connects to the broader network. All of this work is reviewed and must be approved through the city's technical process in order to proceed to council. So the planning process, we're currently at the stage of the application where it's under review from our original submission. And that includes various city departments, as well as external stakeholders and community and residents. We're anticipating comments from the city. We have not received the city's set of comments yet, but we're hoping for those anytime. They have extended the comment process, the comment period, until the end of this week in order to capture comments from tonight's session. I know that there probably was previous literature that identified that the close of the circulation was a few weeks ago, but we wanted to make sure that we could capture all the comments from tonight as well. So our next steps will be to evaluate all the comments that we receive, both here as well as from the city and anything that the city receives from residents. And then we'll review that as we look at the application. We respond to those comments formally, and then those get circulated again. Sometimes it's a couple rounds of circulation that happens with the city. And then as you get closer to resolving the comments, then we would be considered for Calgary Planning Commission and ultimately public hearing of council. We're anticipating that to be early fall, depending on the comments when we receive them and the time to respond to them. So this concludes the overview of the proposed outline plan and land use amendment. We understand there's a range of perspectives that we'll probably hear on how this should develop. And we, of course, appreciate you taking the time to participate. With that, I'm going to move over to the questions. I'll probably put the plan back up and we'll start to go through them. And what I'm thinking of is we can do some written questions, and then I'll look to you, Jane, to see if we have anyone with their hand up wanting to ask any questions on just verbally, and we can hope to answer as many of them tonight as we can. So let's get started. Okay. All right. The first one is surrounding communities are low light communities. The plan shows street lights. How will the ambiance and the community feel? I believe, I don't know if it was part of the area structure plan on this one, but the dark sky policies tend to apply to all communities that are adjacent, that have an interface with our adjacent municipalities. If it doesn't have that as a direct policy statement, we certainly would work with the city to mitigate that through the low light policies. We understand that we're at the edge of the city, and so we have no desire to oppose that if that's the need for this area. So I think we can accommodate that. So thank you for that question.
Kathy, it's Dennis. I'll pipe in on that. If
Yeah,
NMAX
sure.
allows us to do that, I'm all for it, 100%.
Okay. And NMAX did have that in other communities, Dennis, so we will certainly have that conversation with NMAX. Yeah. Next question. Why does this plan not consider the mandatory 800-meter buffer limit between Rocky View County and the city of Calgary limits? I'm a little confused by that question of the mandatory 800 meters. That would be a quarter section of land, I'm assuming. This question came from Kevin. Kevin, did you want to pipe in and expand on that question?
Yeah. Ask him to unmute.
Okay.
Hello, Kevin? Does anyone else hear him or?
I can't hear him, so.
No, okay.
I'll just maybe answer. There isn't a mandatory area. I don't know if you're thinking buffer as in you can't develop within 800 meters. Certainly that's not the case. But I'm wondering if it's an interface area, and that's where we're seeking feedback from our neighbors, because we're on the edge between two municipalities. But I'll see if you have a follow-up question to that. The next one is also why are residential developments being shown on EOS land at this point? And this came right after we started. So the lands have been assessed. They went through, so the Municipal Government Act has some very specific direction on what qualifies as environmental reserve. An environmental reserve, there's a few different things that are included. So the drainages, I had noted the drainages. They have drainages, coulees, unstable land. There's some qualifiers. And so what we do at the area structure plan level is identify lands that have, especially lands that have grading. And as you know, this land terraces down, and identify it as an area that we have to do further investigation. I mean, we do geotechnical analysis at the outline plan land use stage. It's a much tighter grid. You're analyzing the slopes effectively to determine if there's any slope stability issues that would deem the land to be undevelopable. And through that technical review, there was not that determined. And as a result, there are developable lands. So what we did is we looked at all the areas where we had drainages, and that's where you've got the areas, the corridors that capture those environmental reserve portions of the land. And then we extended that into MR to be able to have a good corridor if it where the drainage is stopped. But overall, this is the typical protocol that we follow when we have area structure plans, is to identify it, and then we go through this analysis. And you'll see a number of areas around the city. If you looked at their policy documents and then looked at their subsequent applications, there were places that had technical stability issues, and then the lands had a defined setback, where these ones did not have any issues and allowed us to develop. Okay, the next one. What consideration does the developer have for road infrastructure in the county? 80th Ave and 12 Mile Coulee Road are currently at capacity. I don't know if Jason, if you wanted to expand on that. I know you've done some analysis, and maybe you're better suited to answer that one.
Thanks, Kathy. Yeah, so we completed the transportation impact assessment, which was one of the reports that was noted earlier. And the report does review the capacities along those roads. We also referred back to the plans that the county and the city have for their road infrastructure and compared the volumes against those. And so our recommendations follow pretty closely with what's in the counties and the city's recommendations for the road network as this area continues to develop and build out. So there's also another question further down about type of improvements and whatnot. So signalizations and widenings and stuff like that. So all that's built into the TIA and does follow generally what's in the larger city requirements. As this is still going through the review with the city, we're waiting to hear back from the city on their comments, but generally what our report has found matches up with what the long-term plans are for both the county and the city on this road network.
Perfect. Thanks, Jason. Sorry, I did want to just follow up on one small thing. There was a small little portion of unstable land that falls within the ER that we did identify as ER. I don't want to say there was zero. Thanks, Phil, for reminding me of that little portion that's in there. So we do have a little piece that fell in with it, that falls into the ER, but it doesn't affect the overall stability of the slope. The next question is, how does the development density here compare to Rockland Park? Rockland seems extremely dense with lots of row houses, mostly street parking and very narrow roads, making the neighborhoods very challenging to navigate. Appreciate the feedback. I would say it's a similar density, if I need to be honest. Calgary is very specific in the minimum densities that they want to see. They also have they're reviewing policy to actually increase the densities in future ASPs that will be coming forward. I would say it's very similar. I think what we've established in this is a collector standard road that runs through the community. There's also a collector standard road that takes you up to the top, and those will be your higher order roads that will be taking more of the transportation. We tend to front those. We have a combination of laned product as well as some front drive product along there, just given some of the complexities with the connection to the west. But it would be very similar similar densities as Rockland Park. I think we talked about the next one, which was the concern of traffic on 80th and plans to widen. And I think you addressed that, Jason, when you talked about some of the improvements that would fall within the TIA. What are the plans for the increased traffic and road noise? I mean, we design the roads to be compatible for the increased traffic. Road noise, it's not something typically that falls as a category within the analysis. The city creates their road cross sections to accommodate the different types of volumes, and sometimes they're designed a little bit differently. I think there will be, I mean, there's trees that run along the public roads as well as sidewalks, and so some of that will absorb some of the noise. What are the exit roads for this community? Is this coming towards Bears Paw Village Road? There will be a couple different ways that you can leave this community, similar to Rockland Park. Rockland Park will eventually also connect in right down here at the bottom corner, our southeast corner. That is the connection into Rockland Park. That phase has not been developed yet. So there is that outlet that will occur in the northeast corner, or sorry, in the southeast corner. So our options will be to come down the drive, or also to exit down to Bears Paw Dam Road. And so there will be those 3 access points, and then also 3, including the ones where you can go north and head toward 12 Mile Coulee Road. The road that will go down to Haskayne Park will end at Haskayne Park unless there is a future road that potentially connects through to Rocky View. But at this point in time, I know there's an interim road down to the park, but this would connect, and the intention was always to have it go into the park and then come back through the city. Okay, the next one. Please comment on the TIA findings and the impact on adjacent roads, given the likely pattern of egress from the proposed development. And when will the technical studies be made available? I'll just comment on the second question first. I don't know if there's anything more you want to add, Jason, to that question, the findings. Technical studies, especially with transportation, those are studies that we go through the first round of analysis, and there's typically a lot of questions and things that the city asks as part of their review. And then we tend to undertake a second one. The city prefers, just because of the confusion of analysis, that it be released when it's approved. So we tend to wait until it's been approved, and then it's released and it has all the proper data and analysis that was needed. Sometimes there's just additional intersections that need further work or questions, and so it's an iterative process. So that study will not be, those studies, we typically look at all of our studies and wait till they've been approved, at least by the departments, before we release them. Jason, did you want to comment anything further on the TIA findings? You're muted.
Yeah, and oh,
Still muted.
I don't know what's wrong with my keyboard. So when we do a TIA, we discuss the scope with the city, and there's a certain range that you go out. This scope didn't go all the way as far north as 1A, so that intersection was outside the scope that the city wanted with this TIA, so it didn't look at that intersection. It went across to 12 Mile Coulee and then down through into the other Haskayne, Rockland Park areas, but no, 1A was not included in this study. It wasn't part of the scope the city asked for.
Okay. I had a second follow-up before I get to this. Sorry, do we have any hands up, Jane? I just want to check and see. No hands up. Okay. The other secondary question was, when was the traffic study report completed? So when did you do your analysis?
Why would it? All right, press that button instead. All right, so the report is dated November 2025. So we did the work through 2025 with the report being completed in November 2025.
Okay, thank you. You might keep yourself unmuted and then just don't sneeze. We had a second question about how when the studies would be made public to review. We might also know once we get through the first round of comments if there's some that have been accepted. So we'll know probably sooner if there's some that we could allow for viewing. The next question, can you please explain more about roads and what the vision is for the roads from the city and the county? You said it's fitting in line with those future plans, but did not specify what the plans are. Okay, so the city requires, sorry, I jumped there. The city requires us for the city roads, we have certain standard roads that we have to connect into the greater network. So this collector road extends down through Haskayne Drive and takes you down, eventually getting you to Nose Creek. And there's a standard of road that we have to follow to do that. This road here, and I'm looking at the size, we are sitting on it's a modified collector road that we have here that includes a pathway and utilities. And so we are tying into the existing road. And some of this will come with the TIA analysis if there's anything else that's required. And then we follow the same thing. We follow 80th over to 12 Mile Coulee Road. 12 Mile Coulee Road is owned by the city of Calgary. It's within the city of Calgary limits. And that'll take you up to the intersection at 1A. I don't know if there's anything else we should add there, Jason? I think I've covered it with the classifications. Anything more?
Yeah, no, the for 80th Ave will follow the Rocky View classifications, and then inside the city will follow the city classifications to meet adjacent municipality requirements.
So we'll follow each municipality. Don't mute yourself yet. What are the specific traffic improvements for 80th Ave? We've got quite a few asking about 80th Ave. And will this be built before the development? In other words, pre-built?
Upgrades are built when they're triggered, so they'll be attached to a specific phase. And so as this project goes forward, the city will require an updated TIA with each phase to determine which improvements are required when. And so it sort of depends where the phase is and what road it connects to. So generally, upgrades will be constructed when they are triggered, and that's determined further down depending on the phasing of the project. So little hard to answer that, but they are done in tandem with phases of the project.
Okay. And this one's more of a comment as well, again, on 80th Ave, that there's already homes and acreages that are on the edge of the road and on one side and Watermark on the other. We can't expect communities like Rockland in this new area to use this road in the condition it's in. So that will be, I'm assuming, part of the discussion. I've received another question. The application includes multifamily residences with 3 to 4 story buildings at the boundary within the county. This appears to be inconsistent with the ASP. I might just flip back over to the ASP map. So the ASP, and I would say it's consistent with most ASPs that have been created, I would say up to, I'd say last year. Last year we had 2 new ASPs that were approved in Calgary, one down in the southwest, deep south, and then one for Aurora, where multifamily has started to be placed within ASPs. These ASPs that were approved, even all ASPs up until that point, they're approved with just the residential layer. There is no indication of where multifamily would go. The only place that there's an expectation of multifamily is within the nodes, so that you automatically have to have it there. But ultimately, the goal of the ASP is to be able to place the density within, it gives the flexibility to place the density within the residential area. And so this is the comment that it's contrary. This is residential area with the green hatch over top, like I said, to go through the analysis of whether or not the area is stable to develop on. And so I'd say future ASPs, we've got more of an indication where they'd really like to see multi-residential. But in these older ASPs, we take a look at the neighborhoods as a whole and see where it feels appropriate to place them. I have a secondary comment related to that. The apartment type buildings in the northeast corner of the development do not appear to be aligned with the urban to rural transition outlined in the Haskayne ASP. Please comment. We appreciate the comments. We have, like I said, we're waiting to get the comments from the city as well to see what they feel, how they feel about the plan. If there's some further work that we need to do in certain areas of the plan, we will certainly work with the city planning department. And this might become part of the discussion as well if there's some additional policies that we need to meet. The next question, will 12 Mile Coulee require upgrades as well? I'll put that over to Jason. And then also, will 80th Ave be used for construction vehicles? That might be a Phil question, or one of you.
Okay, so I'll start with the 12 Mile Coulee question. So the 12 Mile Coulee roadway is built to its ultimate cross section down to 80th Ave at this point in time. Upgrades are still left to remain signalization of the intersection. I'm going to grab onto Google Maps here so I get this right. The intersection with Tuscany Way, and then other intersection improvements up at Tusslewood Drive. So those are the improvements that are still left to happen, and other developments have gone through the review process in the past, which has identified improvements there. So those have sort of been tied to other developments waiting to happen. But 12 Mile Coulee is built to its width. There's just some intersection improvements that are left to go when developments occur in and around those areas.
Construction vehicles, is that a Phil question?
Yeah, well, any construction traffic would have to go through both municipal approvals from a transport corridor perspective, and fall within all the road classification requirements. But generally, I'd suspect most of it would come through the collector roads in Rockland, but there could be some coming through Rocky U, but that would have to be approved. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that. Additional question, the ephemeral draw to the west of the corner of 133rd and 80th is a major drainage path and wildlife corridor for the area. The development of the northeast corner will affect the drainage for many subdivisions. Have your environmental studies addressed the impact of offsetting drainage? Historically, this has not been addressed. Your development in the northeast corner blocks the wildlife corridor and does not allow a pathway for wildlife. I will probably let Phil answer the question about drainage because we have some very strict rules that how we have to manage drainage. And then I think I would just note that we did complete a biophysical impact assessment. It's under review with the city. I suspect we'll be answering more questions and related to that when they analyze it. And so just to the comment that this is a major, corridor that I guess that likely will be something that we discuss with the city further with our comments. But go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, all the drainage that's in Rocky View to the west or east of 133rd Street west, east of our site. You have the one side that's rural. That road is rural right now. We'll urbanize it on the within Calgary there, but the culverts will be installed under that road to convey the water. Kathy had mentioned overland drainage through those ER areas, the greenways through the site. So those will continue down the hill. They will be collected into our stormwater facility. And then that will be collected, retained, and then pumped back up the hill towards Rockland Park and then further downstream in the Calgary stormwater system.
Thanks, Phil. Rocky View IDP. Oh, go ahead. We have a hand up. I'll do it right after this. Question.
Sure.
We'll take the question from a live question. Rocky View IDP with the City of Calgary defines a rural to urban buffer zone. We do not see this. We will probably work further with the City of Calgary on that if that is also an opinion they have as well. Okay, we can take that question, Jane.
All right, Greg, asking to unmute you.
Yeah, I didn't get the part answered about coordination between other areas. Historically, the cities and MD have not coordinated drainage plans. You talked about just putting culverts in, but your development in that northeast corner will affect the channeling and which way the drainage will go. Have you guys addressed that in the studies?
Phil, did you catch that question? It's still related to the drainage. Greg didn't feel that we answered that. With it'll be cut off. You're saying you're going to capture it through culvert under the roadway there. Do you want to just explain that a little bit further?
Yeah, well, the northeast corner of our site is actually our high point, and 133rd Street drains to the south towards the low point, which is where the environmental reserve drainage corridor is. So we'll be capturing all that. So the ditch drainage will continue to follow the pattern that it does along 133rd, and then we'll capture it in the low points and bring it into our stormwater system. So there won't be any backing up into Rocky View.
But just to continue with that question, in Bearspaw Village, the houses drain that way. And if you coordinated the drainage from Bearspaw Village down through there, it does go that way. I know there's a high little point on the corner, but everything else slopes down that ephemeral draw.
Comes down this draw you're saying here, Greg.
That's
right here.
correct.
Okay. Okay, well, that's good information for us to know, and we can look at that a little bit closer, Phil. Okay, I appreciate that, Greg.
Well, and there's a 20-meter road allowance on the north
Right here.
side.
Yes,
yeah,
right
we're not
here.
touching that. Like, so anything that can be used as a conveyance for drainage for sure, and bring it into the site.
Down this road allowance.
Yeah.
Okay. It's an area that we'll look a little bit closer at, Greg.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Next question. There's a number of days each winter when 12 Mile Coulee Road becomes impassable due to the grade and icy conditions, minimizing traction. If increased traffic increases the chance of this road being blocked, what plans are in place to allow for egress from Watermark and for emergency vehicles from Bearspaw County to access the community? Well, this road, these connections here through Rockland Park will also give a second connection. You will be able to come down 133rd straight down and right into Rockland Park down to Haskayne Drive. So there's definitely a secondary option for situations like that, where we could be seeing traffic coming the opposite way and coming through the city, if that's the case. So it might, I mean, it adds an extra opportunity, I think, for the residents of Rocky View. The land in question was proposed, to be used for the new Bearspaw Dam. It was rejected largely due to the environmental impacts, significant wildlife corridor, grasses. Why is the environmental impact apparently being ignored? I might not be the best person to speak on this. It might be Phil. I wouldn't say that it was one of the considerations. There were three areas that they were looking at to do their mitigative measures. Certainly, there were lots of questions from the landowners if this was appropriate given the location, and there were open houses where it was an opportunity to speak to it. Are you able, Phil, to expand on this? I don't know that it was rejected. It just was the option that was not selected.
Yeah, no, this was not selected as one of the options. Right? I'm familiar with that, and that would have involved a major CP rail relocation as well to facilitate that. But this was not the area. So we're not restricted due to any plans on the Bearspaw Reservoir.
Okay, thank you. The next question, is there M2 development in the existing Rockland Park development? I know there are some multifamily sites. Offhand, I cannot 100% confirm if they're M2. They're located, there's some located in the village core. And there's also some sites that are over on the east side. I'd have to look back to confirm that, but I do know that there's some multi-sites that are located within that development as well. The next question, Unless 80th Avenue is a double lane, it's going to be a gong show. During the winter, it can be awful. It can take up to 10 minutes during rush hour to take a turn to go up 12 Mile. And so I don't think we're understanding that. And thank you for the comment. I think that goes to the second access point that might be also available. And for those days where it's really bad, that it can accommodate ways to get out of the community. Jane, how are we doing? Do we have any more hands up?
We do not.
Okay, I'll keep going. Will there be access to the marina? Very interesting question. It was interesting when we did the ASP, interesting in the sense where we've got the lands within the Haskayne ASP had, I'd say, three different levels. The Rockland Park land sits on an escarpment looking down. These lands, you can see the water, you can get almost to the water, but it's still removed from the water because we have the rail that runs across. And then the next land, which is owned by another group of landowners, they have also that pocket of land that sits on the south side of the rail. So their land is the one that can, if you're going to touch the reservoir, that's the land that would be able to touch it. So unfortunately, these lands don't have any access. We do have the rail that sits here, and we also sit high enough from the water's edge that we don't have that opportunity. The next question. I don't know if Jason, if you can speak to any of the assumptions that were made about egress south via Rockland versus 80th. I don't know what the split was. Given the congestion in Rockland Park, the latter seems more likely. Are you able to comment on that?
Yeah. So in the TIA, we did two scenarios. One was where the city's forecast distribution was used, where there was a higher percentage of the traffic going along 80th and up 12 Mile Cooley and out that way. And then we did a sensitivity analysis where we took that traffic and we pushed it down into Rockland Park and balanced it out to where we think it's going to go until the city comes back and tells us if they accept how they accept the rationale behind the sensitivities. It's a bit hard to say which one the city's going to accept, but we did look at two scenarios. One where we did push a lot of through Rockland to see how it could handle additional traffic going that way, or the one where there was a slightly higher percentage of traffic going up through 80th and then up 12 Mile Cooley. So both scenarios have been looked at, and I think until we get comments back from the city, I don't really want to go down that line of explaining the outcomes, because the city may have comments on that outcome.
On what the splits were. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The next question, what other services are planned for the community, schools, retail? So right in the center, and there's a current application right now for the commercial area within Rockland. Rockland also has a neighborhood activity center with a fire station and commercial uses. And so there is commercial that's planned for the middle. We're proposing more of a local scale commercial, as I noted, down at the bottom within our neighborhood activity center. So we have, as part of our purple dot, a school site was identified during the ASP, and that school site is actually sitting kind of in the northern portion of Rockland Park. I believe it's probably coming up in the next couple phase. I don't know if that one's been phased yet, Phil, but the school site's been phased and sitting there available if funding comes. And then in addition to that, we have a community association site, which actually this ASP offered two opportunities for community associations, and it was selected to be done in the central area across from the school, as well as this area. We have commercial that's been identified that I still think hasn't been realized at the junction between the two roads that bring you up the drive and then Bears Paw Dam Road. So there is a number of other amenities within the ASP area. Ours, we're proposing that small local commercial site down in the bottom. Next question, will Rocky View Council be consulted during any of the planning and development phases? When you're adjacent to another municipality, it gets circulated to the administration. So certainly the administration can consolidate comments both from themselves as part of administration, and they could, if there was feedback that any of the local councillors would like to provide on the application. There doesn't tend to be, and it's typical the opposite side as well. If there's an application in Rocky View, there doesn't tend to be direct conversations with councillors, but certainly there is an opportunity for that feedback to be part of the intermunicipal committee conversations, which I do believe have some counselors that sit on both sides within those conversations, as well as comments to the city administration, the file planner on the file. Next question. For 2 years, Calgarians have been told to take shorter showers, skip laundry, and let our gardens die to save our system. The Bearspaw Reservoir is the heart of that system. How can you ask a city that is currently under a microscope for a water crisis to accept a development that risks the very source we're all being told to protect at our own personal expense? If a single accident or runoff event occurs, the 60% of Calgary relies on this water, and we can't just ration our way out of a contaminated supply. So, Phil, I think this is an important question to answer because there are very strict standards we have to meet, especially when it's the drinking water. And certainly that's where, when we talked about some of the overland drainage coming down and going into our storm pond, it has to be managed. We can't just overland drain into the reservoir, but maybe I'll let you expand on that a little bit more.
Yeah, no, there's been extensive study done on a source water protection for this area. And the stormwater management system is all of any new development in this area is required to be fully collected and pumped and taken around the site through Rockland, so it does not discharge directly into the Bearspaw Reservoir. It is critical to the city's source water protection for sure. That's a great comment. Obviously, it's been frustrating for Calgarians for sure to be on those restrictions. The other thing too, I'd like to mention is as development grows in this area more up towards North Calgary, there is going to be a major water feeder main that comes up 12 Mile Coulee Road that does provide redundancy for the city's water network system. So there's and that's largely funded by the levies and new growth area. It's long overdue to have that redundancy in the city's major feeder main network throughout the city, and so that will be constructed over the next 2 to 3 years.
Okay, thanks, Phil. The next question, is there a road plan that extends 80th Ave down? I think that's the one that I was talking about, that there is. So this road does come down 133rd, so 80th to 133rd, and it connects in and into Rockland Park. So it connects in at the top, it follows generally this alignment and then comes in, except I think it's a direct route right into Haskayne Drive, the final designs. And then you have that opportunity to come out this way, or you can eventually, once these other phases are done, there's also the opportunity to come along the escarpment and come down Bearspaw Dam Road.
I think the question, Kathy, was 80th is a T
this way,
intersection.
like right here, right here. This
and
road.
no, there is no plans. That's quite steep through there, and so our road is the one you see with the S curve there.
We did look at that just to see what the grades were. Thanks, Phil. I totally misinterpreted that. We did look at it, and as Phil said, the grades were too significant to be able to come down that road allowance. The next question is more of a comment. It says 133rd Street is currently only being used by 30 homes. The next question was, would 133rd Street also be used by Calgary Transit buses? So at this point in time, I don't know that we have a mutual kind of transit agreement between municipalities. Certainly when the ASP was looked at, the intention was to take transit down, one of the North Road, come down to the park, do a turnaround, and then come all the way back and go down the opposite side to be able to have coverage on both sides, which still gives you some timing, I'd say differences of timing on both sides. Not the most ideal scenario. Even at the time of the ASP, that was discussed, that it's probably not the best and most effective way to utilize transit. At that time, we didn't talk about if there's agreements. Maybe there's a potential opportunity to talk about that with the city, and that's something that can happen at that intermunicipal governance committee to talk about, shared. I know that we've definitely, I'd say, expanded our municipal agreements. Prairie Economic Gateway is a great avenue where we've started to look at mutual benefits to having development that benefits both municipalities. And so certainly I would say if there was an opportunity with transit down the road, it's always something that can be brought in that capacity to have a conversation. The next question is, you say that construction traffic is going to come from Rockland Park, but the road hasn't been built. The shortest and quickest way into this development is through 80th, and what are their plans to compensate those who back onto 80th? I think the timing is a little bit, I know the last phases are being looked at right now within Rockland Park. I appreciate the comment, though. That doesn't mean all timing works out, but the services need to extend from there. So Phil, maybe you can speak to that about how it would be probably unachievable to not have that extension piece and leapfrog to another part of the site.
The road connection is going to be a condition of our initial phase of development there to Rockland Park. In fact, they're conditioned to bring that road to our property line as part of the Rockland development. So it might even advance some of our development, but that will be available to us. Construction traffic is a function really of where it's coming from. If, for example, if we're drawing gravel from the Burnco pit, it's really going to go through Rockland Park. That'd be the more direct route. And we don't know where the contractors are going to be sourcing their materials, but generally gravel for road construction's one of the main ones. There'll obviously be some building materials, but if they're coming from south, they're likely going through Rockland. From the north, possibly up through 80th. And again, all those things will have to be approved through the proper channels here with the municipalities.
Thanks, Bill. The next question is just generally, what is the consideration to rural residents being impacted by the large increase in traffic? I mean, as I noted earlier, it's an interesting area. It's an interesting annexation line. It's bringing two municipalities together. Some are using county roads, some are using city roads. I think there's probably, an impact to both. Appreciate the comment, but it's definitely unique, I would say, to a lot of the other annexations where we tend to take, blocks of land. And I can remember this was a very negotiated annexation line that happened. So lots of things were happening politically, and I know access to the park was a big thing. So I think there's nothing that I can't answer the question, but I can appreciate the question that you're asking. The next one, 80th Ave connection to Haskayne Park will bring a lot more traffic on 80th. What traffic assumptions were made and how will this issue be addressed in the design? I think that was part of the background traffic. I'm sure, Jason, that when you were given the forecast from the city, they had assumed a certain number of trips that would go into the park. And so that was already built into it. So they'll be analyzing that when they look at your data. Okay, so that should be captured in the analysis.
That is correct. Yeah, the city's regional transportation model picks all that up.
The next one, do you have any further development planned on the other side of Haskayne Park? This is on the other side of the 200-acre park, I'm assuming. This question came from Sarah. As of right now, this is the boundary of the city of Calgary. So the boundary actually takes you all the way to the edge of Haskayne Park. And then it is Rocky View County that sits on the other side of this gray dash. So as far as what's contained within the city of Calgary, it ends with the park space, and that'll depend. I think there's a Glenbow Ranch ASP that Rocky View had approved a number of years ago. So there is definitely policy that provides guidance that sits within Rocky View County. So that would be my suggestion, is to look at that ASP. Another question, like to see clarification regarding the traffic impact environmental studies completed to date. There is concern as to whether these assessments fully and objectively reflect the potential impacts, as the scale of development being proposed appears difficult to reconcile with what one expect. if the studies were comprehensive. That will be something that the city does look at. The city in their review. Certainly, it will be capturing, just so you know, we were capturing all of these comments, and we'll be sharing, and they'll be contained within our What We Heard report. It's definitely something that we can identify to the city team, that there has been noted concerns about whether or not all the impacts were included. And certainly that's part of their analysis, is to look at the area and decide if they feel it's been appropriately addressed. Yes, this is being recorded and will be shared afterwards, so that will be available for everyone. So if you have a neighbor or a friend that wasn't able to attend, they can certainly get a copy and watch it. Another question for you, Jason. Did the TIA and sensitivity scenarios consider the cumulative volume of the traffic that may exist via 80th and 12 mile of existing proposed and future development of the area, or only this incremental proposed development? Also, when will the approved TIA be available to the public so that meaningful consultation can occur? I will, at this point, we can't determine if we have one or two additional sets of analysis we'll have to do with the TIA. It depends on the city comments. So I can't fully determine when we might hit that point, but we certainly will keep the public informed. And I don't know if you want to add anything, Jason, on that first part of the question.
Yeah, so with the city's regional transportation model, so we looked out at different year horizons for build out. And so the city's model assumes a certain amount of development that occurs by those future horizons. So there is other development going on that it has assumed will occur in those future horizons. So it is all added in together in the city's model. And then we've added our traffic on top of that by looking at what's been assumed in the zones and making the net difference up to what we were going to have in that area. So yes, all these other areas are included in the city's model, and they do increase in population and jobs over time. And so that all gets baked into the model that the city gives us and the volumes to use.
Okay, thanks, Jason. Another question, are you communicating with Rocky View County with regards to how they'll manage 80th Ave if this development goes ahead and your planned access and egress? We certainly, Rocky View gets circulated. I can imagine, and it's certainly a question we can ask our file planner, how much engagement everybody has as part of a file application, and if they get together or if they just address comments. But we certainly will, I mean, it's part of the process that both municipalities are involved. It was no different with applications within Rocky View. The Calgary team gets approached and they provide comments. Can you discuss your plans for ongoing engagement with residents impacted? Certainly, we will be, as Jane had noted, we prepare What We Heard report, and we try to see how we can address the comments, and we kind of balance comments with the city feedback as well. And then we kind of polish that up and finalize it and provide that to residents. And certainly, if the plan changes and there's different, I would say any plan changes, we will be sharing that with everyone that's attended here, as well as anyone that's signed up to receive information from us. And we'll definitely be sharing the final plan before it moves forward to public hearing and council, and providing the What We Heard report and our rationale for some of those changes. Next question, will there be busing to Tuscany Station? I mean, we're going to be part of the City of Calgary transit system. I'm not exactly sure how the buses are being routed. Sometimes buses will take you from communities directly to stations, and sometimes they'll have routes that will just take you either express buses downtown or take you on a route to an alternate place you can do a transfer. I'm not 100% sure at this point if the route is taking residents up to the station. The city has restricted access for residents to the Bears Paw Reservoir in Haskayne Park due to environmental veg restrictions and sensitivity. Could you please ask the city to explain how they allow development of the draws in your plan, which would have similar veg as the restricted areas? And that's something, like I noted, we are going through that analysis with the city right now, and they're reviewing our reports. And we'll see what other additional comments they have. And if there's some of this that relates, then we certainly will need to address it. I mean, we've had our analysis, we've put together a plan, and there is that impact assessment that we've submitted. And certainly we're waiting to get feedback from the city. The next one is Emerald Bay Springbank been included in your communication for feedback as they are one of the three sides of the rural interface? Jane, maybe you can comment on how we circulated this. There was a radius, I believe, that we had captured.
Yeah, for sure. So we distributed the initial physical mail out through, I think it was 800 meters from the site, general radius. Then we did outreach to surrounding CAs. We did some outreach to Rockland Park. But yeah, if the communities that didn't hit that 800-meter radius, we probably reached out virtually to CAs or in other ways.
Does the TIA take into account the traffic flow from Rockland as well? As we talked about, there's background traffic that gets included, and it looks at the ultimate development. So there's a lot of stuff that gets baked into that model that will include Rockland. It'll also have some assumptions for the land that's directly to the west of us. That's between us and the park. There's like a little sliver of land in there. It takes into account also the residential areas within the county. So it does cover all of those areas in the forecasted traffic. Can the residents of the affected communities get a copy of the traffic impact studies? I think it's only fair to see those. And we certainly, when we have that point where we've got most of the analysis in there and we're feeling the city has analyzed it properly, then we will share that with the public. Has any consideration been given to locate the higher density on the northeast corner closer to the neighborhood activity center shown in the ASP? Would mitigate sightlines and lower the densities. It certainly will take all comments into consideration and review them together when we have the comments from the city to decide if that's something that we would do. Emerald Bay and Springbank are less than 800 meters from the site. Were they included? I believe so. Ours was it was a drop. We did a drop with everything. So I'm assuming they were. We could certainly go back and double check that if they weren't. If you're hearing that you did not think they were included, then we will look into that a little bit further and get the information out to those folks. All right. With respect to counting for Rockland flow in the TIA, is this based on the plan of Rockland or actual, as many secondary suites were put in which were not planned for? Which has resulted in congestion. That's a very hot topic right now with the city. The city is looking at those, and they've actually assumed a certain number within plans. I can't confirm 100%. That might be, I don't know if Jason knows the answer to that, or if we'd have to inquire with the city transportation team that did the forecasting. But we have been talking about suites and how that impacts population projections within all the geodemographics. So it's definitely something that's being considered, I'd say, across the city in a number of applications. So do you know, Jason, if you can confirm that if there was kind of a line item in the forecast for that?
No, because it's just done on general population and jobs anticipated in those zones. They would need to go back and compare, like the forecasting team would need to go back and compare whether or not the assumptions that they've made matches with the ASP, and then the changes to secondary suites. That would have to be a question for the forecasting team to see what
we can chat with them and find out. Sure. Okay. And then I have another question. Are you prepared to create a buffer zone between the county residential and the development that's being proposed? We'll certainly take that away and look at that holistically with all the comments. Okay, I don't see any more questions. And because it's adjacent, is there a possibility of lower density? We'll give that consideration as well when we look at everything, when we get the comments from the city. But understanding that the comment has been heard from the group tonight. Okay. Don't see any more questions. It doesn't mean we won't take your questions. It doesn't mean we stop at this moment. As Jane had noted earlier, we do have an online feedback form, which can take additional things. So if you think of other questions that you might want answered or didn't want to ask in front of the group, you can certainly send them in. They get captured with all the other questions that we've captured tonight. We do have a project website that's available here. It's haskaynenorth.ca, where you're able to, and then Jane, I don't know if you can put your email address into the chat as well that is available.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yes, there were some questions that were sent to us prior to this call. Just gonna, I'm just gonna go through them and see if there's any that I did not that I could address right now just to help out. We talked about the EOS study area, so that was a number of questions that we did receive. Why there was development that was sitting in that area that the ASP had identified as EOS. So I think we answered that within this what we've talked about to date. If we haven't, certainly you can add that into the chat. The other question that we were asked was about historic resources. There's different ways that historic resources are managed on sites. Many times we try to locate them in open spaces. I can't put a map up because those are people go and dig things as soon as they know where there's potential historic resources. Sometimes we leave that in open space. Sometimes it falls in line with where development or a road is proposed, and we have mitigative measures that we deal with the province, but we manage it. And certainly the historic resource review has been done on this. It was done at the ASP level. I'm just looking to see what other questions. Again, talking about the ecological network. There were some questions related to TIA and transportation, so we answered that one. There was a question about Indigenous engagement, and the city has brought that conversation into new ASPs. We found that the last couple ASPs that were done after this one, there was fulsome discussion at the area structure plan level of ways of just it was mostly a conversation and just an acknowledgement of land that was being looked at for future growth. And that tends to fall nicely with an area structure plan level conversation. This one was in advance of that, so there wasn't any formal conversations, but certainly there is the team at the city that can be engaged in a conversation. And typically what they're most curious about is if there were any special historical resources that were identified on the site. We didn't have anything that was identified as part of the ASP. And so in those ASPs where there was special things identified, there was additional conversation. So we didn't have a formal process, but certainly it's available if we desire it. There were also some questions about addressing noise, dust, air quality, stormwater impacts, and that falls into a lot of our technical studies and a lot of the standards that we have to meet. And so that becomes part of the city process. And like I said, a lot of this review happens early on. We get a host of conditions. I don't get it. Phil gets it mostly because he tends to do the next advancement of all the various stages with infrastructure and phasing, where we have to meet all the city standards for all of those qualifications. And we tend to do that and we agree to it, and it gets reviewed by the city as we process the next applications. We were asked if we do any technical studies outside the boundary, and that tends to be some of those high-level ones. Transportation, as Phil noted, we sometimes have to look at the servicing outside of our boundary. For example, the source water protection element that brings us, we have to bring all of our stuff past the drinking water locations. So there are certainly some studies that go beyond our area. I think the last bits, if there's any additional ones that I've missed, I certainly can bring them. We can bring them up when we address what we heard. I just went through it pretty quickly, but we did receive them and review them. We had a comment that your neighbors informed you of the meeting and did not receive a notification, and I apologize for that. It's certainly hard. Sometimes we've got folks that run notices to houses. It's very difficult, certainly if you're in a rural location, and sometimes it might be in a place that you might not open your front door, or you might, that might not get to you. I think what's important to us is to have your emails noted so that we can give you updates. as we go through this process. That's the biggest thing. If you've got a neighbor that hasn't, send information over. So Jane has a list, a compiled master list, so we can make sure that more information does get shared. But apologize, we try, but sometimes it doesn't reach everyone. Timing, I think I addressed timing. We're looking to see if we can secure our approvals in the fall, but we've still got quite a bit of a process to go through. We'll be receiving our comments shortly, and then we'll be going through all the city comments and addressing those, as well as layering some of the comments we've heard tonight. So we'll target it, but we'll keep you informed as we kind of know where we sit once we look at the comments. Okay, we've got 4 more questions that might take us through to 7:30, but we'll see where we are. Could you please clarify your position regarding responsibility for road conditions resulting from ongoing development in the Rockland area? Residents of Watermark and Bearspaw Terrace have observed increased double trailer traffic on 80th, along with gravel debris that may be contributing to vehicle damage and safety. In this context, are you prepared to accept responsibility for any resulting damages or accidents? Well, I don't know who wants to answer that one. Phil, do you want to answer that one?
Well, any of that type of traffic, I'm sure is not related to anything in City of Calgary right now. There is no connection through that route. So it would all be within probably residential acreage development within that local area. And then, yeah, if there's any, like I mentioned this before, any construction traffic, they are obligated to have construction management plans and do pre and post road assessments and deal with the municipalities if there's any degradation of roadways.
Okay. The next one, do you have any knowledge about expropriation of the tree farm west of the property? I have no knowledge. I don't know of any conversations. Different landowner. I know the city desires having a path to Haskayne Park, but I don't know of anything that's progressed with that site. What measures are being taken to ensure the multi-residential development along Bearspaw Village Road does not negatively impact the natural views for existing residents? I appreciate the comments. I mean, views are great. They're not I'd say part of the full planning analysis. Certainly even though you see it as multi, that doesn't mean it's completely, covered in multi buildings. We haven't taken a closer look, but we probably will at just what kind of form that would create. There's also some grading elements that we'll be looking at in that area. Just given the nature, there might be some opportunities where the buildings aren't prominent the full height, but we'll have to look at that a little bit closer and appreciate the comment. We'll see if that what that means from a development standpoint. Okay, and I'm going to take the last few, 7:22. We will be finishing at 7:30. So if we have any that are unanswered, we certainly will add them to our list. I live a few meters from the site and no one informed me. Appreciate that. So we'll look a little bit closer about how we managed the notifications. So again, apologizing. There were questions around what considerations was taken in regards to impacts of this change on the current residents, specifically around 133rd, who are not used to high traffic and noise. High density can also impact the crime rates, and study on that or increased Calgary Police Services and traffic cameras. I appreciate the comment. It's this land has been contained within the city for almost 20 years. We're going to be, it was 2007. The discussion started in 2005. And certainly there was an opportunity at that point in time when it was being annexed for feedback and conversation, but appreciate the comment. The lands, are in the city, so they have different density expectations. As the city it has its minimums that it's looking to achieve, but we appreciate it. We'll know a little bit more about the mode split and what kind of volumes that'll be as we have the further discussions with the transportation department. And then I'll just take these last 2 questions and then we'll conclude. And then another one about consideration of moving the apartment style down instead of at the corner, if we'd consider moving it elsewhere in the site. We'll take that away. And then again, the draw in the northeast corner combined with the M2 site doesn't show respect for the land, wildlife, or neighboring land. So we will take that away as well when we look at all our comments that we have gotten for the site. So Jane, I'll leave it to you to finish up.
Yeah, all right. Well, thank you, everyone. We appreciate the questions shared this evening. As noted earlier, this is an early stage in the planning process, but your feedback is still important and will be reviewed by the project team as the application continues through the city's review process. I've shared the feedback form link in the chat. Zoom tells me it'll automatically redirect you to the form once the session ends, but just in case, that will be in the chat. We encourage you to submit any additional comments through the form so they can be included in the engagement summary. But all these comments that we've heard today, as well as questions, will also be put into the engagement summary. Following tonight's session, we'll also share the presentation slides as well as a recording of the session for those who are unable to attend, to also share with your neighbors, as well as the feedback form link. So thank you again for joining us and taking the time to participate. And that concludes tonight's virtual session. I hope you all have a great evening.
Thank you.